What is up, everyone? Welcome to Gentlemen of the Corax. We had an episode planned today, which we'll get to, but some recent news came out today, and I figured that it would be a really good idea to make a podcast about this. And the concept of this is really going to be about de-extinctions. And as a little bit of a backstory, today, at least at time of filming, Colossal Biosciences released press news everywhere about their dire wolves, which I'll have in massive quotations. And yeah, so we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about de-extinctions and the possible impacts and implications that they may have. So without further ado, Cole, you want to ring us up on the details?
Sure. So this morning, I couldn't really sleep last night, and so I woke up having not much sleep, and had a text from my friend, and I checked my phone, and it was very disorienting text, and I opened the link he sent me, and there's a picture of a wolf and a headline saying the dire wolf is back, and I became very disoriented by this, and I'm still disoriented by this. So today, a genetics company startup released news that they had bred two wolves, Romulus and Remus, which I think the only completely unassailable thing about this project is the name choices for the two twin wolves, because that's awesome. It's exactly what I would do. But two gray wolves, Romulus and Remus, who they've modified their genetics in eight different places to match what they see in direwolf genetics. So they use two direwolf specimens, one from Idaho and one from Ohio. Inside you, there are two wolves. One is from Idaho and one is from Ohio. Um, and so they've produced these two twins, Romulus and Remus, who are 6 months old. They've got distinctive, very shaggy coats that are white, and a few other phenotypical traits that are more in line with what we expect to see in dire wolves. Alongside that, there's another one who's another pup. Her name's Khaleesi, which already dated pop culture reference aside. So they have three of them, and I suspect they want to make more. So they've gone to the press about this. They say that there's a scientific public peer review publication incoming that explains everything that they've done. I'm very eager to see this because I'm having a hard time interpreting things from like a New York Times journalist. Uh, so, and they hope that this will have like kind of these experiments on wolf genetics will. The most immediate ramification is that they can do work with red wolf genetics. And red wolves are the most endangered canids in the world. They're having a huge population bottleneck issues right now. And alongside this project, they're also doing a lot of work on buffering and fortifying the red wolf genome, and have gotten several litters of pups out of that as well. So that's what I know about it. That's what I've read. Uh, yeah.
And what's important to note about this too is these direwolves, they aren't the fossil direwolves that we know of. What they essentially did was they edited, I believe it was 14 genes in total that would basically give a gray wolf the phenotypic traits. So like the traits that you can basically visually see that would make them resemble what we think a direwolf would have looked like. So some of these genes would have been the fur coat. So that's why these wolves have that white color and they have that shaggier appearance, like you said. They have larger jaws and skulls than what we see in modern gray wolves. And these were basically carried by domesticated dogs as they were when they were pups. So this is because these wolves, for people that don't know, dire wolves were larger in size on average than what we see with modern gray wolves. So they needed a dog that would have been, big enough to carry these larger animals. And it didn't use any direwolf DNA. They really just looked at direwolf DNA and tried to match that with these gray wolf DNA that these are. So it basically is a gray wolf that has been edited genomically to resemble what a direwolf would have looked like.
Yeah, so they didn't use any gene splicing or cloning. So things that would actually be taking the genes from the direwolf and creating something out of that, they're just changing genes to match. Uh, I am not sure. I'm again definitely not a geneticist. I'm not sure I see much of a difference between two animals who have the same genetic code. One that have the same genetic code. Just one got it from ancestry and one had it edited. I don't know how that would make it a substantially different genetic code, but
Well, these animals, I don't believe they're exactly the same
oh
genetically. I think it's
no,
just
no.
some of the
Yeah.
physical traits.
Yeah, but like the actual gene strand, like the genetic codes that they're editing it to be like a direwolf genetics, code. And if the two codes are the same, I don't see that. I think that would still make it direwolf genes. If that makes sense. Like just because they didn't like literally take it from the direwolf and place it in, I still think that would if the genetic code matches, that is essentially a direwolf genetic code.
Did they
Please
say how
correct me if
they
I'm wrong.
were creating the new genes? So they're not taking existing direwolf DNA and splicing it in?
No.
Nope.
No.
They've
So
cloned what is interesting, like in going through like all this discourse, as you know, a paleontologist, I did spend like most of my day. Mondays are usually free, just diving into this. The interesting part that I feel that I wish that the general public would take from it is that they cloned blood of the like base gray wolves. It is an like less invasive way. Like blood, you're okay getting rid of that, taking a like a core of the animal's skin to make viable cells from a living gray wolf. That is invasive. So the whole blood cloning thing, that is super neat. But they didn't use any direwolf DNA. They just kind of spliced regular wolves. They're wolves. I'm sorry, they're wolves. They're just
They're
regular
gray wolves.
wolves.
They're gray wolves.
Like
well,
they're
I'm trying to figure out the methodology. So they're just turning genes on and off?
yes, basically that's what they're doing.
They did some of that, but like they actually did actual like turning genes on and off is different from editing it.
Yeah, they didn't.
They've done both. Like for
Yeah,
example, um, I'm trying to interpret this from a just a random journalist from the New York Times interviewing one of them. But the white color of these wolves was they identified the genetic strain, like three genetic strains within the um direwolf genome that indicated that these two direwolves both had the one from Idaho and the one from Ohio both had light coats. They considered putting that actually editing the gray wolf genome to include these new traits, but in this case, those traits are also associated with blindness and vision problems in gray wolves. So instead, they edited a different part of the gray wolf genome to turn off production of brown and red red, brown and black in the gray wolf coat to create that white color. So kind of going like editing they also edited the genome in other places in order to get the results that you would see in the direwolf. But they on top of that they also did in fact um, edit the genes to match what we see in the direwolf genome. So I think that both those things going. Again, we don't have the publication to back this up. We're just kind of interpreting this, trying to through the filter of a journalist. But um, so we could definitely be misinterpreting things.
yeah,
But I think they're doing both actual rewriting it to make it more in line with the gray wolf and or rewriting it to make it more in line with a direwolf and editing it to get what they're seeing in the direwolf genetic code. That makes sense. The
Yeah. So
non-geneticist trying to
these are
explain
de
that.
novo mutations that they're inducing mutation and just swapping genes in and out that they know this gene produces this outcome, this phenotype.
Yeah.
I mean, my father is a chemist and like geneticist, so I am not. I want to make that very clear, but kind of based on growing up around that, chimera is not the correct term to be using, like in this context, but I think it's the the best. This is not, it is a gray wolf, but one of the genes that they were really heavily editing is skull shape, which is an insane thing that they isolated in the first place
Mhm.
because cranial morphology coming down to specific genes, the fact that they were able to extrapolate that successfully, I will give them that. They found what they wanted to find in this code and they changed the skull shape of an animal, which is cool. But Chimera, these are not direwolves. This is a lot of like when during my research internship, they the paleontologists at the museum said that they would always have to have a sauropod on display because it was the big sexy dinosaur. That is what got people to come in, and that's
Or
what
part
got
level sense.
funding to keep going. And so saying direwolf instead of transitional like wolf for the exploration of gene editing is not as much as a mouthful. And you know, millennials were kind of the ones that have money to throw around right now. And man, we loved Game of Thrones.
Well,
I'm just
George
gonna say,
R. R. Martin is an actual stakeholder in this colossal. Like I'm not kidding. He's a shareholder in this company.
you know what? He wrote a physics paper, so he'll do anything to not write the Winds of
Yeah,
Winter,
wins a
whatever
winner.
it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, what
this is divine punishment for millennials. Yeah,
It's
it
just
is
give me the
indeed.
thylacine,
Yeah.
colossal. Just give me the
Yeah.
thylacine.
So a lot of people are decrying it as like all spectacle and showmanship and stuff. But the fact that they are rewriting the Grey Wolf genetic code to match what they're seeing in dire wolves, and they're getting an associated phenotypic response that makes the animal itself look more like a dire wolf is, I think, that's not nothing. That is interesting.
It's cool science. I think that even if we were to call it a direwolf, we cannot call it the scientific name Aenocyon dirus because what's interesting that it used to be believed to have been a canis like the modern day dogs and wolves, things like that. But it appears that they last shared a common ancestor. I think it's like 4.5 million years ago.
Dire wolves are the outgroup to like the entire canid family, as we understand it.
Yeah, so like African wild dogs, for example, and jackals and wolves, they're closer related to each other than they are to the dire wolf.
Yeah.
So there would have been some convergent evolution to make a dire wolf look kind of wolf-like, just based on its social structure and its trophic level, things
Yeah,
like that. But it's definitely not the same thing, and we have evidence that they didn't inbreed with modern day wolves or other wolf species. That they're basically a separate lineage. And I want to stress this that I'm not a wolf person, I'm a shark person, so
Yeah.
it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I did go down a little bit of a rabbit hole today, so it's just such an interesting topic, and I think that we really did need to cover it.
Okay, so question for everybody. What is the threshold? What is the standard we would have to meet to say that we have actually brought a dire wolf back from extinction? What does everybody think?
I I have to pivot back to my beloved thylacine. You gotta give me that animal. Like I am willing to make some let some things slide, but like to have I think it needs to be reframed, if I'm quite honest. What we're looking at from the marketing standpoint, from someone who has written a ton of grants in language to hopefully get more money and make it sound like not over exaggerate necessarily, but again, the big sexy dinosaur principle, saying dire wolf gets you attention. Scientists, though, as we have seen, I've tried to stay off Twitter as much as possible, but I was in a Discord chat that just blew up. It's the wording, I think, that's getting people. What it would take for me to be a dire wolf is to have more like in common. This is more transitional. I need something more substantial or even a difference in behavior. I do think that they jumped the gun with this a little bit because these are at this point juvenile wolves. The behavior from juvenile to fully matured wolves, from what I understand from my friend whose PhD is in red wolf like studying red wolf populations, they will act way different when they get older. They are in their puppy uglies, their puppy syndrome. So I want to see the results of these genetic changes that they are making before I kind of am able to throw more of like my opinion
Yeah.
around.
Oh yeah, we need more information.
Yeah, like are these like this right now? I am very interested in the technology, but I see this as a stunt. I see this as a stunt to help the technology that could then really, really get us something. That's great, but like calling these dire wolves, I'm a little tuned out because they're not dire wolves.
Yeah.
Not to be negative, just
there's also the like how much of dire wolf behavior, wolf canid behavior is learned from, existing in the population that it grew up in.
Mhm. We didn't
Probably
get a lot on
more
that.
of it. Sorry.
We didn't get a lot on that in the articles that I read. Like there wasn't a lot about how these pups are being reared, which I found a little interesting. Like at least I didn't see anything like, are they being raised with other wolf pups? What are
They're not.
they're doing? Yeah, like I just like they had their interaction with other canids being their surrogate mothers, and then
Mhm.
nope. So
They were weaned a little early, but just kind of because the mom of them was kind of acting a little too protective and getting in the way of actually kind of monitoring their health.
yeah, makes sense.
But besides that, they've only known each other, I believe, and they're kind of being raised alone in their giant 2,000-acre preserve. Which I mean, like there's three of them. It's not like not a
Yeah.
cursed existence, and they're not. It's not by itself. Um, so yeah, what does everybody else think?
Well, I think that learned behavior is also an important thing too, because they are talking about bringing back the woolly mammoth, and I think that's kind of like the staple animal that they're shooting for. But at the end of it, they're these woolly mammoths that they'll have. Mammoth social structure, or I guess like any elephant social structure, is so complex with so much knowledge being passed down from them that it'll be really difficult to bring that back into whatever elephants they make that have those phenotypic traits of a mammoth, especially when they're talking about reintroduction, which is another big topic that we should talk about. It's there's definitely some hurdles and some implications that might or might not be good depending on your stance.
Yeah. So there's a lot of discourse going around that nothing we can ever create could ever be a direwolf because as a species, as these people define it, exists within a population, and that population is gone. So even if you have something that's the exact same thing genetically, phenotypically that exists that we've created because it can't trace its ancestry back to this actual species population, then it can't possibly be a species, and de-extinction is impossible. I don't really accept this. I don't define a
Yeah, I don't.
species as just like a group of descent. I think there is a suite. Species are in essence a suite of genetics and morphological traits, physiological traits, and that if no matter how no matter how it came into existence, if something has those traits, it is that thing. So that's my criteria. It has to be genetically, within a direwolf you know, geno genetic population and match the morphological traits that we use to diagnose uh, the taxon. And if it's not that, then it's not a direwolf. but
I'll throw my hat with
it is
that.
it is it is hypothetically possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Uh, Do we have the entirety of the prehistoric direwolves genome,
I think
I
we do,
think
or,
or at
so.
least
or
close.
enough to produce something viable?
Um, I think everybody's having problems with that. Like we've had the mammoth genome for like years. We've had the Neanderthal genome since for like 15 years. The Neanderthal genome was sequenced 15 years ago, and it's in a pretty similar spot in regards to like quality of preservation. So and like that study that came out a few years ago, kind of identifying direwolves as not just Canis dirus, but as its own like outgroup to the canid family. That was genetic based, not like a cladistic analysis of morphological characters. So I don't know exactly. I think we have all of it. I don't know if it's sequence, blah blah blah. Again, I'm not a geneticist, but I think we have enough of it that it's not a problem. We know what direwolf genes are. We know what they aren't.
Yeah, and another thing too is what exactly constitutes a species. We see that as an issue both in extant animals, where, for example, we have with sharks, which is a little bit more in my wheelhouse. There's a lot of shark species that are described not necessarily from morphological characteristics, but strictly genetics. But if you looked at the sharks and you had no idea like where they came from, you would have thought it's one species, but it isn't. Um, One example of that being like the Australian blacktip versus the blacktip shark. There might be some slight morphological variations, like I think the vertebrae count in the Australian blacktip sharks are different than the other blacktips. But even then, with the black tips and the Australian black tip, you have populations that are jumbled together to the point where the exclusion of the Australian black tips renders that the black tips in total as paraphyletic because you have some populations of black tips more closely related to the Australian black tips than they are to like other regular black tips. So it really jumbles things. And then when we look in the fossil record, you have these long transitional lineages, such as the famous Megalodon lineage. You have all of these little transitional quote unquote species like Carcaricles, Axuaticus, or Carcaricles mugatsaharcus that are really just described based on like slight differences in where serrations are on the crown before you get a fully serrated crown on Carcaricles auriculatus. You see these type of transition things with the Carcharodon, the great white lineage too. And that really jumbles things of what we actually can define as a species. When you have a chronospecies and things gradually evolving, where do we just draw the line and say, yeah, that's a species, or no, that's the other species that's just slowly changing?
The
So
modern concept, you want it to be interbreeding. Is your benchmark?
yeah, I mean, like the most common modern definition is that two animals that can interbreed are the same species, produce viable offspring are the same species. But then you have like weird freak incidents like sturgeon paddlefish hybrid, that is a hybrid between two distantly related fish that last shared a common ancestor in the late Triassic and produced viable offspring. So, like that's a pretty big problem for that definition. Um, so there's lots of different definitions. So some people say two species that not only can but do two populations that can and do interbreed with each other. So like, if you have this thing on this side of the world and this thing on this side of the world, they're isolated by ranges. Even if they could interbreed, you would still consider them different species. Um, I don't like that one either because that means every time you take an animal out of the wild and throw it in a zoo, like that would make the thing technically a different taxon according to this definition. It's way too arbitrary in that case. But I'm going to quote Dr. James Napoli of the Skeleton Crew in saying that just because this species concept is hard to define, doesn't make it not real. And like just because a for example, a mountain range is hard to draw exact borders around doesn't mean the mountain range isn't a real thing. That makes sense.
Hmm.
The genetic definition, I think, is the more that you've pointed out is what I'm willing to label like a dire wolf. Morphological like traits do influence like an animal's behavior, and if we get exactly these, physical manifestations and even just like more behavioral type things in whatever, because right now there's no way that you can convince me Romulus and Remus and Khaleesi are direwolf. They're not. But subsequent, like, you know, generations of these, they, I think, can technically, at least in my eyes, achieve a direwolf. We are not there. I think that's my main like issue with this has been the framing, but I do believe like you can theoretically pull a direwolf out of the ether, and I would be kind of fine with that. If genetically you've put all of the right gunk into it, you are going to have an animal that looks that way. And because of the way that it's, even skeleton is assembled, will act a certain way like the animal would have when it was just in nature. So I'll throw my hat in the
Well,
you can pull it off.
ignoring like all the learned behavior that they would have
Exactly.
going on,
Yeah.
but like also at the same time, animals change learned behavior to adapt to new circumstances that didn't exist anywhere in their ancestry
Yeah.
before. And I wouldn't see like a new learned behavior as say in 1,000 years when we actually do have a dire when we release it into the wild and they develop their own learned behavior. I wouldn't see that like that's the species adapting to a new
The
developing
crows
new
and cars,
behavior.
what comes in
Yeah.
mind for that is that crows will go up on the top of telephone poles and throw down like nuts and wait for cars to hit them.
Hmm.
And the crows will eat these like cracked up
Yep.
nuts. They're still crows.
Yeah, crows are insane. Crows
Crows.
are
Not a new species
Orchids,
though, just based off of behavior.
Hmm.
yeah.
right. Well, I think that comes down to like defining population and how can you have two things that are completely disjointed populations with no shared ancestry and call them the same species. That's that argument. Not saying I believe in it, but that's the argument is that, you know, a species is all of those things that go into it, including learned behavior, including genetics, including morph,
And isn't that
I
including
don't know. I think it gets way too complicated when you start looking at the fossil record and trying to take a definition for species in the modern sense and apply it to something prehistoric.
yeah.
The modern one should just be interbreeding, producing viable
Mm.
offspring.
And
Mhm.
isn't there a bit of a debate too with orcas and the species surrounding them if there are multiple species of orca or not? Because you have these
Different
distinct
populations.
populations that don't interbreed with each other that have different, I guess you can call it cultures and different languages. Um,
Yeah, but genetically they're the same. That's why I'm thinking this thing. Right now it's just gray wolf with a few genes turned
Yeah,
up or
absolutely.
spliced in.
Fancy wool.
Well, how
Mhm.
much genetic change has to happen until it's no longer a gray wolf? Where's the cutoff, right?
That
How
is a
much
good question.
change?
Can it still interbreed with wild gray wolves?
yeah, and
And
that's
produce
And
viable
and
offspring?
and if you just like create a new species, like, or create something that's different, tax it can't interbreed, different genetic suite, different more phenotypic suite. Uh, what is it? Is it a species? Is it an abomination?
yeah, and
Any
Um,
species.
it kind of comes down to when we're looking at these. You can have different species that, or I guess quote unquote species that can breed. Like, for example, brown bears and polar bears. They can still breed, but polar bears are derived enough where if we looked at them morphologically, we think that, yeah, that's a completely different species, even though they are a paraphile within the brown bear. So would we think of that as a polar bear just being a subspecies of brown bear, or do we think that since they, as a whole population, have been isolated enough, even though they do on occasion breed with other brown bear subspecies, can we call them a new
right.
species?
And like the different species definitions work, like are varyingly useful. Mileage may vary, from group to group. Like the one that we have, can interbreed, is like works generally really good for mammals, but it doesn't work for fish because the
But did we not already
paddlefish hybrid. And plants are even worse because plants are like, plants interbreed cross families like literally all the time. And there's lots and lots of plant taxa that are just descendants of like symbiotic relationships between two completely different plant groups. So that species definition doesn't work at all for plants. So again, I don't think there's a good one that's useful for categorizing all life, but that doesn't mean that a species is not a real thing.
Well,
My
Yeah.
final.
I'd say the brown bear versus polar bear, they're in the process of speciating. They're just not quite done with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh,
It,
I mean, it's like look at modern, like domesticated dogs. Some of them can interbreed.
mhm.
Right now, we mark them as all seems. I don't know, it's just an issue of categorization.
It is, yeah.
should we
And
be doing
another
this?
thing, what?
Should we be doing this at all? Is my favorite like question to
I think it's cool, so therefore, yes.
I think it's cool. The I think that we're at, especially with this announcement, it has made me very I'm really tuning in because I think we're on a precipice of it can go one way or another, and I don't exactly know if the Colossal is really trying to push like their angle of like conservation. I want to see that. And I don't think like that's much to ask if you're gonna really advertise yourself as a like de-extinction and like conservation company to like I was talking to someone earlier, give me like
They,
what
they
like,
they did talk a lot about their red, like in the Times
yeah,
article. They did talk a lot about
about it.
the work with the red wolves.
Yes. And
So
I
that is
that's
real, and they are fortifying the red
yeah,
wolf, genome population from inbreeding. So that good,
yeah.
great, and they're funding it based off their mutant wolves.
Yeah, well, yeah, the big sexy wolves. The big
Yeah,
sexy wolves.
yeah. Um,
Uh, so they're making a bigger, supposedly stronger, slightly different shaped wolf.
yeah, I mean, like
And
they have wider snouts. They've got wider snouts, shaggier coats, and all
yeah,
that comes from editing the gray wolf genome to match what they are seeing in the dire wolf genome. Sorry.
what else can you do with this technology?
Hmm. What I want to know is how much does one cost?
No,
I'm kidding.
not
I'm
just
kidding. I'm
market.
kidding. I'm
They
kidding.
won't sell those
I
mice.
want it. I
Every
want it to
every girl I
guard my
know
mansion.
wants a
Yeah.
woolly mouse. They won't sell those. There was like that was the big thing when they announced the woolly mouse is people are like, when are they going to be in pet stores? And they're like, these
Well,
are
Yeah.
proprietary mice, is what they said, and I lost proprietary mice. I lost myself. What is it, Brent?
okay, but they do that with the fish, right? The
Yeah.
glowfish. They
I
have
was,
like they genetically they put what was it, jellyfish genome, DNA,
uh-huh.
whatever in
Yeah,
there? Yeah, to make them glow. Why can't another company go and take mice, do the woolly genome edit and sell them, right? Is there a patent on woolly mice?
I'm gonna look it up.
I would imagine
technically it's
so.
illegal.
Yeah, ultimately, these dire wolves are, I would say, more like glowfish than dire wolves.
Hmm.
No, but what I was getting at earlier, who's going to
Okay.
be the first one to start splicing human DNA,
Oh,
make bigger, stronger, more efficient, smarter humans?
Well, I'd
I mean, this
imagine there
technology
would
has been
also
around
be
since 2012 when
We we
CRISPR
elim- we
Cas9.
eliminated we eliminated the propensity for heart disease in your son, and for $3,000 extra, we can also make him really attractive.
It,
Oh, I mean,
it's
it's a slippery
terrifying.
slope.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah,
I'd
because
You
I
ever
mean,
seen
the
imagine
Chinese have
Bianca?
been doing this since 2015. There was a big scare over them using CRISPR on humans. In
Hmm.
the years since, the Koreans, the Indians, the Chinese, and definitely the Americans, under the guise of cancer research, have been working on humans using this exact same technology. So this direwolf stuff, I just see it as a marketing ploy. Just start to make people more accustomed to the idea of genetically modified organisms, with the future goal of doing it to like modified crops, modified insects. They've been doing that on mosquitoes, that sterilizing them with gene drives using CRISPR.
Mhm.
Modified humans. So I just see this as the next step of many. It's just the next step along experimenting with genetic power.
So
Yeah.
you said they're getting people used to it, like normalizing it, right?
Mhm.
So when bigger changes come and more controversial things happen, it won't be too much of a shock or too much backlash. I
Well,
mean,
that's
when I
more the
saw
way
the
to
woolly
go.
mice, I was surprised people reacted so positively. I saw nothing but praise. I didn't really see any negative comments about them, even though it was just an experiment. Um, I don't know if anyone was saying it was unethical or whatnot.
Well, the thing is with like the woolly mice is I feel like that's something that could have happened through, multiple generations of artificial selection with breeding, which we've already done with dogs to such a huge extent. So looking at a mouse with long hair, it really isn't that much of a shocker to people when you think of all these other dogs and cats that we have with, similar long-haired features that are caused solely by us choosing what animals to breed and creating those lineages.
That's a
So
great
it
point.
it's like sped up dog breeding, basically. You just skip the breeding and you go straight to having it look different, right?
Pretty
Oh,
much, but
no, you're just figuring out what gene you want to knock out. I mean, what gene you want to use based off of gene knockouts, right? So you just go through, sequence the DNA, right? Figure
I
out what gene, what?
I think we need to actually like see what they publish on this before we can like say definitively what like have an opinion on what they're actually doing because we don't actually know how any of this works yet or
Okay,
what they
I mean,
interjecting in that,
I've got a
are the
genetics
mice
background, so I do
patented?
know.
okay. Gotcha.
Apparently, the only way you can make these mice is with their proprietary technology. I don't
Let's
know what that
go.
is. I don't know what that
Another
means.
another win for
Mm,
capitalism.
So, like, I think, Brennan, what you brought up earlier
Hmm.
is what's going to stop another one of these like similar companies, because apparently there was like some discourse about that. Um, what's going to stop one of those other companies from making a woolly mouse? Well, apparently nobody else has the technology to exactly activate it as much as 5 centimeter increase in coat,
Oh.
using the non-proprietary
Hmm.
technology available to the public.
Well,
You can only get like 3 centimeters.
until you're
So they can
underpaid
get close.
They
until your
can get,
underpaid systems engineer steals shuts down the system and steals all of the
yeah,
embryos around it.
yeah, yeah. So
Well,
we can
the
get
technology is not proprietary. It's the sequence, the
wool-ish
genome.
mice, but not the woolly mice of
Yeah,
And
get close.
anybody could buy a CRISPR kit for about $600. I mean,
that.
that's a cheap one. That's
No,
probably not going to work. But like a real, I could see a research project being funded with about ten to $20,000 that could recreate the woolly mice thing within 6 months.
With the right people, right?
Eh, anybody that's got a background in cell culture.
yes, to the right people, because that ain't me.
and
Nah,
what were you
nah, me
saying?
neither.
And what were you saying earlier, Trevor, when you're talking about the
Neonization.
genetics?
Uh, I was just talking about how they go about doing it, right? So you just go through the sequence of genes, figure out what gene's worth what, and you do that by breeding a knockout, right? So it's a version that has this gene turned off, and it's just you're brute forcing it. You're breeding 1,000 of these things, turning one gene off each time, figuring out, okay, what does this gene control? And I'm guessing what they did with the dire wolves is they kind of figured out, okay, these are genes that control body size, muscle mass, skull morphology, and they just turned those on or spliced them in. Or maybe not splicing, because it looks like they're saying that they didn't actually do any splicing. Splicing would be interesting to think
Well, then
about.
is this more ethical? Like, is this a more ethical way
I
to,
would say no.
yeah, that's like the because
I
I
I actually don't know. It's
The argument of
just
like
gut feeling.
woolly mice would
I
it
mean,
have
the
been able to,
technology exists. It's like nuclear power. It's like,
yeah, like it would have taken like say 15 generations to have the coat of these mice be just even a little bit longer. Is it better that they just kind of bypassed all of that experimentation to get
I
us
mean, is
something
it
else
wrong?
immediately? I don't, as someone with a chronic
International,
illness, I don't like the implications of this towards like human like genetic things. Is like I have something but I'm not broken and I wouldn't want to like edit it out of myself. Um, but like we're not
well, but
talking about like
wouldn't
the
that be the
human
way to cure
implications.
that chronic illness?
I mean, I probably not something going into right now, but like we're talking about
Hmm.
the fake wolves.
You guys ever seen Gattaca?
I've been thinking about that this entire time. Thank
That
God.
movie rocks. I love that
That
movie.
okay, the
Mhm.
movie is fantastic. My dad is obsessed with that movie as a like chemist genomist. I think that's given me a cynical look towards whatever's happening here.
Yeah, it's
Pretty good.
I see that as the way the future's going.
What is it? That one from the 80s. Something Logan's Run?
I
Is
haven't
that
seen that one.
Lord, it's like you can only live to like 25 um based on like how your genome is, and then once you turn 25 they like throw you to the proverbial wolves outside the safety.
The direwolf, the
You
genetically
like
modified
so
direwolf.
really so yeah, this is the first part of Logan's Run because now we have the proverbial
This,
wolves.
this, sound, this sounds like a teenage YA not dystopian novel
It
like
is because
from like
you're like
2009.
your gem will glow when you meet like your soulmate.
Oh my God. Yep.
Apparently it's what
You
inspired
sure this came out in
Gattaca.
the 80s?
It inspired Gattaca, which is why I thought about it.
Okay, gotcha. So do we want to move on to de-extinction? Not de-extinction, rewilding.
yeah, I think that that would be a good segue
Yeah.
because that's what their mission statement is, I guess,
Yeah.
is that they want to save these critically endangered animals with this technology and also reintroduce these extinct animals so that they can fill these ecological niches that have been quote
Do
unquote
it.
left vacant, I guess, since these animals became extinct.
Yes, do it. Great.
Yeah, there's a lot of people like saying a lot of things about this. And I haven't heard a take that I like enough to steal yet, so I've got much less to say about this.
So I personally am not a fan of this plan because if we look at these direwolves, for example, one, we don't know for sure if they'll want to just start interbreeding with our actual wolf populations, which could permanently affect the gene pool of the local wolves around that area, which we don't know the unintended consequences of that. If they become wildly successful, they could outcompete our wolves, and then we have these GMOs that are doing their jobs better for whatever reason than local animals, and they're basically like an invasive species on steroids. Then there's the other,
Literally, yeah, literally, like
yeah.
Oh
giant,
yeah, like
like
these
pissed off
wolves are
evil
jacked.
wolves.
Like
So there's that, and then there's also some of these niches just may not work in the modern ecosystems. So who knows if it's a really good idea to introduce mammoths back into Alaska, if that's a beneficial thing.
Rule of cool.
it's no
It will be
thylacine.
cool, so therefore we should do it.
Do the
Hmm.
thylacine. That's it. If you want to rewild, we are within the. I'm assuming everybody here knows what the doomsday clock is. If you don't, let a bunch of like physicists are like, we are this far from midnight. Midnight is the end of the world. For the next extinction, we are within the time bracket for the thylacine of a species where the environment hasn't completely healed around it. If they want a good kind of like example of like what they can do with rewilding, they really need to focus on the thylacine because that is the only of the animals, the super extinct animals, not just the critically endangered animals that they have the genomes for. The thylacine is the only way that they could literally prove it in real time. We have the time bracket. I think it was 1938 that the last thylacine, which was in captivity, was a male, and its female partner had died just a couple years earlier. But the last thylacine died in the 30s, almost 40s. We have time to successfully rewild and see the implications of this technology.
It's since World War II was coming and checked out.
It's like
1938.
honestly, what a vibe.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Like
what caused the extinction of the thylacine in the first place?
humans caused the extinction of the thylacine in the first place.
Hunting.
Their coat, yep,
And
hunting, and also the thylacine was viewed as a pest animal for the cattle industry, even though they actually weren't. It was being interpreted incorrectly. They would nip like at heels, but a thylacine is like the size of a small, like medium build dog. It's not going to take down a cow. But
and
it
so
was
releasing a whole bunch of these things into the wild again, what's going to stop them from getting shot?
hopefully the you're going to go to jail for 25
Yeah,
years.
more kind of like organization control over
Yeah,
like
like
There's going to
landowners
be a
not
black
shooting
market
anything
for
that
these
moves on their
things bigger
property.
than rhino horns.
Yeah, you're
Come
right. You're
on.
right. Oh my God. People are gonna want to hunt these and sell them because that
But
would be
then
so
again,
like collectors and stuff
maybe
would
that's
want
the
that.
appeal,
My
right?
Oh my
So how do
thylacine
God.
we make these
built
things profitable? You
Well,
sell
my
Oh, that's
hunting
messed
thylacine
up.
licenses for 'em,
giant hat.
so for
right?
people
Like,
that don't
oh,
know,
go
Well, you and I
mammoth
like
hunting.
are vibing so high
Just
also.
farm them. I don't have like a wild population and then like a farmed population and just sell the farmed population.
Well,
Because I don't
I
think you're
don't
ever
I
going to
don't
be able
think
to reintroduce
I I don't
these.
think you can like I don't think like potential issues over like what if people break the laws and kill them is like a good way to approach it. Like people don't like it's not 1923 anymore. People don't just like shoot anything that moves on their property. Like we have wildlife management laws that generally work. Um,
In Australia too, like that
yeah, and especially in
prohibited.
Australia where like nobody's
Yeah,
allowed to even like have a gun.
correct. Like they're
You're going
gonna
to be hitting them with their cars.
Yeah. Oh,
Come
Oh,
on.
so
it's
here's the
roadkill
thing with the
thylacines.
so with the thylacine, for people that don't know, that's the Tasmanian tiger, and it's
oh yes.
kind of like the poster child. That and the dodo, which Colossals also said that they want to work on. It's like the poster child of anthropogenic extinct animals, like things that we caused. So it's kind of gotten this almost cryptid status. People want to find one so bad. And I think that's what's going to make it a little bit different for how people perceive it um, because you have this animal that people didn't fully understand, and it's almost like I worship is probably the wrong word, but it's almost got like that type of status within the
exalted.
I think
local
you're right.
people. Like
Like
they would
They'll
embrace this
respect
type
it.
of animal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exalted. Yeah, I mean, look at like condors. Like we weren't worried that like when we released a bunch of like when we took California condor population was like 30, went out and grabbed all of them from California, got a stable breeding population in captivity, and then released them all into the Grand Canyon. We weren't worried about like, well, what if people go out there with guns and shoot all of them? I don't like. I don't think that that's like a serious objective that policy can't overcome.
I
Okay,
can
but
tell
like
you.
what about elephants and rhinos? They're
Well,
poached
yeah,
for their horns
we're
and
talking about
stuff.
Australia. Like, if you were to if you were to breed like a stegodon back to life, or like a straight tusked elephant, and release like two of them in Kazakhstan, where that thing's cooked. But like, if you were to do that in Australia, or places that can actually implement like sensible and effective wildlife management policies, it's different. In the case of the Tasmanian tiger, I don't think this goes for literally any extinct animal ever, but
Brennan does make a
um,
good point
Hmm.
though, in that um, it kind of can give the negative implication that now all animals, including endangered ones that aren't GMOs, that they're disposable, that we can just make more of them after we kill them off. So who
Yeah.
cares about these
That
laws?
is
I
an
mean,
argument that I
cloning, you
heard today.
Yeah,
can.
that's a good point.
Yeah, I have heard that a couple times today of, okay, well, I think it was a thought experiment, and also the guy who proposed it was just a jerk. Who was like, what about ivory again? Like, we could do that now because we can have more elephants. And I'm like, how about you figure out how to just make ivory and leave the elephants alone?
Well, we use like mammoth ivory these days. I until very recently worked up in Alaska, and like the ivory trade there is huge because it's the only legal ivory that you can get. There's this very long and storied culture of ivory like working in many cultures around the world. And ivory trade for elephants is totally legal, but mammoths, we find a new mammoth tusk poking out of the ground like every other day. So, um, hence like that's kind of filled in a lot of the the demand for ivory.
It's true. There's a dentist in my city that has an ivory like waiting room table
That's that's
of a
awesome.
mammoth ivory. Yeah,
That's
he's just like a really eclectic dentist that is on
yeah,
a fossil forum and is like, "Hello, look at my table," and I'm like, "That what
better than shooting Cecil the lion.
exactly?" Yeah, well,
Yeah. Yeah, I gave my brother a mammoth ivory guitar pick for Christmas a few years ago.
that hits, man. That's
Uh,
awesome.
Yeah, I would be definitely worried about the implications of what that means. And it's also going to, I guess, push less pressure on protecting native animals because, again, we can just make more of them. The consequences aren't as dire as this animal that's been around since forever is going to become extinct if we don't do something about it. Like we've had so many good comeback stories for animals, such as like the American alligator, the bald eagle. But I don't think that we're going to have those again if we're just releasing these GMOs to fill these niches and then we just say, okay, somebody poached all of our thylacine, let's just make more and put more of them back.
Gotta give me a thylacine. The thing
it's like
is,
a park building game.
what's no, it
Hmm.
is because what's filling the niche right now of the thylacine is people's pet dogs that have broken off
Dingoes.
and started their own wild dog packs and cats. Like
Dingoes.
dingoes, yes, but like I just it's it's frustrating to see this technology and them not putting the most effort into what I guess like as a scientist I do consider like the most viable like show we can do whatever we say because again people are alive that have seen a thylacine. Ain't nobody kicking today that has seen a real direwolf.
Although imagine how tragic it would be if there are some thylacines still alive, like some people think, and then they get outcompeted by these GMO thylacine that we use to replace
Just
them.
like a buff
I'm stuck.
thylacine, just like walking up like a pit bull to the tiny chihuahua actual thylacine. No,
Um,
I have my thylacine.
another point. Circle back to the mammoths real quick. A point that like this ecosystem is healed around them. The idea in a lot of these cases is that they want to recreate the mammoth steppe as a carbon sink as a part of the answer to global warming. I'm not sure how viable that is. It sounds kind of made up and an excuse to make just clone mammoths because they're cool. But the idea is would need a mammoth or other very large Pleistocene megafauna in order to keep the mammoth steppe that you want to recreate in kind of equilibrium. So the reintroduction of the mammoth would go in hand with kind of engineering habitats to these Pleistocene very nutrient dense um dry herbaceous steppe environments that
Terrifying.
apparently are can help fight global warming. So that's the argument. I'm not I don't have the chops to critically evaluate it, but that is the argument.
To me, at the end of the day, these are going to be both GMOs and invasive species at the same time. If we were to take these Asian elephants with long hair and just putting them up in Alaska or Russia. And we really don't know what the implications are, how that will affect those ecosystems and all of the native life that is still alive in these areas, how that can affect, because life really does have kind of this butterfly effect, especially when we look at things that are so delicate like these food webs.
Yeah,
Just a
okay.
tiny little thing can collapse and then everything with it. And now we're going to be introducing these new apex predators like dire wolves, these
American Lion's
monster.
coming back. American Lion. I want to see it.
But how do you even get a breeding population of these things when you don't have enough DNA for even a single individual? Unless you're cloning it like crazy, your population is going to have no genetic diversity at all.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
Cheetahs.
They'll probably
But then
use.
maybe that's the goal, right? You don't want the population to get out of control, so you just have a whole bunch of identical copies.
Cheetahs. Cheetahs are so inbred,
Mhm.
incredibly like so because of when I was in, gosh, back in the day in college, um, we were like framed to think of the cheetahs that, starting over here in North America, going over to Africa, maybe at max two females, one male, based on the genetic diversity that cheetahs have at the base. I'm not saying it's a good idea, Trevor, but I'm just saying we still have cheetahs. Yes, you can take a skin graft from any cheetah and slap it on another cheetah and it won't be like rejected, but you can reject your own kids like skin grafts. Fun fact that I learned. That's like how much cheetah is in a cheetah. So breeding population, I think we also need to
That's
not
cool.
look at it from like a human ethics standpoint, because in the wild, they don't care how closely related they are. If it keeps the species going, they're gonna keep it going. Um,
What if you do the Jurassic Park thing and make them all the same gender?
Well,
and inherits the earth.
you just keep making
Mhm.
them? Wouldn't that be expensive to just keep making them?
I think
I
these people
mean,
have more
not if
money
No,
than
people are
you
paying
just
for
go
like
to the species
ivory and bits
hatchery
and
and you
pieces
press the
of the
button and
individual.
you say
Copy paste.
choose which embryos
What?
you want to incubate and then
But
hit
wait a minute.
click.
cover your eyes.
You don't
And
want
then
them getting out of control, right? So you don't want it to be an invasive species. Just keep them all the same gender, right? So they
I
don't
got two words for you.
reproduce. Yeah.
Mammoth.
What?
I got two words for you. Mammoth hunt.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
if they're getting too out of
Yeah.
control, you just go up in there, hunt them. Oh my God,
And
that's
you
so
know who can hunt the
cheating.
mammoths? The experimental archaeologists.
Yeah, get your spears out.
actually,
Get your addle.
you
Go down there.
you've convinced me. You've convinced me. I'm gonna call. I know the head of the UT Austin.
Let's
Like,
go.
yeah, we're gonna
Let's
we're gonna go.
the Clovis culture. It's back, baby.
Oh my
No,
God.
couldn't they maintain some genetic diversity by by using different wool like gray wolf modern gray wolves, and then they change whatever genomes they want from the dire wolf, but they don't change everything, and they have like some slight differences based on different gray wolf bases.
That
Well, I
sounds
mean, I bet we could get enough direwolf genetic sequencing from or genetic variation from the population at La Brea. I think we could do that pretty easily to introduce this variation that we need. Might be pretty time consuming and not cost effective, but the genetic diversity does exist. We can access it. It's just pretty not very cost
cheetahs
effective.
are cooked. Cheetahs
Yeah.
are we can't, if they can fix the cheetah again, I will put all of my effort towards the thylacine or fixing the cheetah. But also, like, fun fact
How
of the
many
day.
preserved uh, cheetah carcasses are out there that have more diversity?
As far as I know, when that was like a research subject that I was going over, at least I didn't know of any like sort of petrified or like mummified cheetah anything. All I know is that while we were doing the I found out about like the cheetah diversity thing at the same time that there was the big push about like announcing the separation between dire wolves and like the rest of like wolves
Day.
in general. We had to redo our display at the museum, which is like maybe a little like bitter moment of my heart, was having to like redo an entire assignment. But as far as I know, there was no cheetah anything. It's just that the cheetah genome that was sequenced, if you know, and I'm not saying I do, if you know how to read genomes, apparently, according to my professors, it is tragic to look at, like just how inbred these things are. It's apparently a really sad, like A, C, D, like, I don't know. People
So
read binary and get upset. I'm sure that you can read a genome and be sad for the world.
we've got species where there's only a handful left, right? Like 9 in the wild. We could just use this technology instead of bringing back way long extinct animals that don't have modern habitats anymore. Uh, to save species that are going to be extinct in our lifetime, right? Like,
That's their
like,
goal, right? Like it's
but they're using
the
the famous animals as like advertisement and for funding and stuff, right? So they
You
can
know,
fund
you
the
use,
smaller projects.
oh yeah, because it grabs headlines. I mean,
Hmm.
technically, you could use this technology to create new, fun, and exciting, like brand new things too
But that would
that don't
be
exist previously.
unethical.
Whose definition of ethics are we using?
Well, I guess they did that with the
not
mice. The
yours.
woolly mice are new things, right? They didn't exist and now they do. Um,
Yeah, I also want to bring up
fun.
another point too about genetic diversity. Cole, you brought up a good point about La Brea with how
Mhm.
much they have there. If these dire wolves that or the wolves that they made do turn out to have a similar look to what they were basing it off of, if those dire wolf fossils that they had actually had that long white fur, that most likely would not be the case for more southern direwolf populations
Well,
because
they had a light coat, like they identified the genes in the diral genetic from the two that they sampled. They identified a light coat. Both these guys are from Ohio and Idaho. That's right up on the ice sheet, the Laurentide ice sheet. But I'm not sure. I don't know if light coat is the same as white coat, to be honest. We need to see the paper for this.
yeah.
They didn't give any indication like how far off that is, right? Like it
I, this is me
SPP this year
interpreting. Yeah.
would be that would be like such a well also
Bad day to be a Pleistocene researcher.
oh
They've had it too good for too long.
Yeah, I mean you still see different fur coat colors on different wolves
Yeah.
of the same species. You see it
Well,
with brown hairs.
there are people on Twitter. There are like paleo Twitter people like upset that like the dire they made it have the coat that's not what we inferred based on its phylogenetic bracketing. What your inferences going into it are not the same as like this kind of direct genetic observations. And I think there's a lot of kind of hysteria in paleo sphere about this right now. Not that I've experienced it. I don't go on Twitter at all for any
Well,
reason.
well, a direwolf population in Arizona, even if it was a light colored coat, it still isn't going to be
Right.
the same coat that we see
That's
on
not gonna be
wolves.
stark white. Yeah. But I
Yeah,
mean, like, you know, and modern candidates all have like a lot of variation in their coat. There are, you know, Arctic wolves, there are gray wolves, there are wolves with kind of some more brown and red in their coat. So
it'd also be a much shorter coat too.
yeah. Yeah, I think the bushiness of these new Romulus and Remus's coats is a direct consequence of overriding their genes to look more like the direwolf genetic code. I don't know though. Again, we need to see the paper.
not know
Yeah.
that I don't know how to read any like genetic like info that they publish. I want to read
Yeah,
the
I'll just wait for some like SciComm person I
I'm
trust to
gonna
explain
throw
to
it
me.
at my dad and be like,
Yeah,
Dad,
yeah.
read it. I know you're retired, but do it.
Yeah. I think all in all, there are a lot of populations of organisms that have definitely taken a large beating from human civilization. We see that with mammals becoming extinct, like what they're talking about with dire wolves and mammoths, which probably at least in some part had to have been done with people. Whether I'm sure the degree towards our involvement in that varies based on the researcher,
Yeah, I
but
think it varies a lot from place to place. Like the woolly mammoth, probably not. The Columbia mammoth, probably. Like that's like for as an example.
yeah. But anyways, and then you have that, and then you have more modern um things like the dodo and the thylacine that have suffered from us, and you have modern animals that are still alive today but are critically endangered due to a lot of human activity. So for example, like great white sharks, we definitely have taken a toll on them. And sharks in general, they're very susceptible to human intervention because they have such slow reproductive strategies. They give birth to very few pups, so they tend to be very vulnerable for people, for human activities. But at the end of the day, I don't think that us bringing back these extinct animals because they look like what they used to is the solution. And I think that us trying to further um, our conservation efforts really seems to be the best bet. And it's also the most sustainable bet as well, rather than us just keep funneling more animals to fill niches that may or may not need to be filled or may or not be able to be filled. It's just way too experimental. We don't know enough, and it's very fast. Everything's happening very suddenly.
Do you believe then what Colossal is saying, that they are what what is it, 5 years out from the first iteration of trying to get to a mammoth? That's what
I've
they're.
been hearing that for like almost 30 years.
See, that's the thing. That's the thing. And it has been 5 years out every single time I've read the Colossal like mission statement for the past 2 years. Um, like we have this entire thought experiment of reintroduction, like all of this, is that actually going to happen viably in our lifetimes?
I think it'll happen within the next 5 or so years because if we already have mice with this type of trait, I don't think it's that much harder to assume that they'll do that with an elephant. It's just a matter of what the implications of this are. If they're going to start a Pleistocene park or if they're going to be just dumping these animals
Take the
You know,
dinosaurs.
Alaska.
I think the
Oh,
idea they have is to do like, this cool flashy stuff funds all of their conservation research. Um,
Okay.
like that's what they say. I like is that like an entirely accurate representation of their motivations? I don't think so, but that is what their pitch is essentially.
Yeah.
and
And
they
at the
keep
end of the
saying that
day,
they're really close, right? That they're only 5 years away.
Yeah,
I think a
which I
big
mean, this
problem is,
Marvel thing kind of makes me like I'm taking them a little more seriously now
I
because
will
like
give you
again,
that.
this Marvel thing is like mostly flash and spectacle, but there is something real there, I think. Um,
yeah, but I think the big problem is they're just a lot of these are startups. They're not really hiring the best and brightest. They're just kind of hiring whoever they can.
Beth Shapiro is one of the
Yeah,
smartest people on the planet, and I will die.
yeah, but these geneticists, they can make a heck of a lot more in the healthcare industry. They're doing this for
A
fun.
lot more in the healthcare like industry. Beth Shapiro was also a tenured professor in California, and she decided to leave and be the CSO of like Colossal.
At,
Again,
at
I have
this
very mixed feelings.
technology is over 15 years old. I
Then she
think
should know
a
how to use it.
sufficiently motivated group would have been able to do it a lot sooner. I'm actually surprised it took them so long.
I think a lot of it has to do with the ethics behind it. and there's only so many
Well,
places
it's
that
not
you
like
can.
immediately marketable. I also don't think, which
Well, there's only
tech.
so many places you can put however tall of a mammoth.
I mean,
And
well, but we're all talking about Pleistocene stuff. I'm thinking, what if we wanted to bring back T-Rex? How hard would that actually be?
I think we have a series of movies that shows that that's a bad idea.
No,
Don't worry
stop!
about that.
No,
Just
get
think
him
of,
out of
I think
here! Get
10,
him out of here! I hate that take. It's so dumb.
yeah. No, but really, I think it
Ian
can be
Malcolm's a nerd.
done. And
With what?
He's a beautiful man. I
look,
have a picture.
I wish
within our
Samuel would have just
lifetime,
told
I
him to
think it
shut
could be
up, you
done.
stupid
Mm,
I have a Ian Malcolm as I think Jesus, but with a baby T-Rex
Mhm.
going like
nerd.
this, and he has a halo. That's
So here's the thing with dinosaurs is the Pleistocene stuff and the Holocene stuff is so much easier for them to do because we have these pretty complete genome sequences of them.
And we
But
also have like very close relatives.
we do, yeah. But with T-Rex, for
That's
example, what are you going to use as the surrogate for that?
Yeah, what are you going to use as the surrogate? Well, I mean, you don't need a surrogate. You just need like an artificial ostrich egg. Um,
Well, start with a bird, use that as your scaffold, and then just brute force start trying and figure out whatever produces the largest, most aggressive, most dinosaur-looking gene.
but
Put all
that's
those genes and just stick it all together.
that's not bringing T-Rex back. That's just creating an actual abomination.
and we already
Okay, well,
have
it's an
the
abomination
chicken
that looks like
X.
a T-Rex.
just like
I mean,
mammoths in the direwolf.
So I would imagine that with a T-Rex, you would need a lot larger of an egg than an ostrich, which is the
Now,
largest bird.
amniotic eggs can only get so big before they like implode on themselves. So, like the biggest, like even like the biggest sauropods you can imagine,
Robotics.
can have eggs that are not that much bigger than an ostrich egg.
Hmm.
Yeah,
No,
they're
these animals are just doing a lot of growing in the first few years of their life.
the
Like
sauropod
there's
eggs in
big
India
eggs.
and Romania and Argentina are like between the size of one of those mini basketballs and an actual basketball.
Yeah,
They're not.
I'll cut them away for.
And then also,
All right.
depending on how far back we go, some animals might not even be able to survive in our atmosphere. They
They
might not
can't.
be
We don't
able to
have the right
breathe.
amount of oxygen and the distribution of nitrogen in our air.
well, you could fix that.
That's
Just
yeah.
design it so that it breathes our
Also, that's
current
like
atmosphere.
oxygen was both higher and lower at different points
Correct. Like, but that's like
than it is
for
now.
I know that, but like throwing out like that in support of that argument is if every like
Well,
little nitpicky thing
the,
of
the, the,
the
the real
temperature
problem
is
wouldn't be the
wrong, like
atmosphere. The
Ah,
real
come on.
problem would be them being immediately annihilated by modern pathogens. Like that's not only like could be a problem, that would be a problem. That would be the main problem.
Well, no, you just give it an immune system based off something that currently exists.
Yeah, and if
Yeah,
we're doing
you
that
just
though,
take the
then
immune traits and swap it out for
Mhm.
Come on, you
is
need
that
a
how that
little
works?
creativity for
I'm
picking
not
stuff.
just, I don't know. You could be correct.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have that issue. We have the issue of us finding the DNA sequences that would make it viable. That's going to be a lot harder the further we go on. There's
It's not
obviously
even
the
hard. It's not possible. It's just not feasible.
what?
It's not just hard. It's like just not feasible.
yeah, it's not.
I think it's feasible.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
amber
well,
graphic.
no. I think you got to just start with something that resembles it, just as your outline, and just start messing with
Well,
different genes and figure out all of them that produce gigantism and traits that we associate with dinosaurs, like I don't know, tooth.
in terms of recovering dinosaur, like non-avian
Yeah,
dinosaur genetic material, was
yeah.
my point. Not that eggs kind
Yeah.
of
You're not going to
horrific.
recover dinosaur genes, but
Yeah,
you can recreate it.
it's not hard. It's not going to happen. Um,
Yeah. That's
I
not
mean,
going to happen.
yeah.
But yeah, so this was our impromptu discussion on de-extinction. I hope you guys enjoyed. We had almost no prep on this, so hopefully we didn't have that much of stumbles for it. But yeah, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let us know what you think about these de-extinctions that are going on. Are you pro or against? And what are your thoughts on the dire wolves?